that's Bera on Modi. How's Bera on the anti-CA protest and all the human rights violations that took place at that time?
Especially over the past year or so. Well, he's basically silent. He's certainly silent when it comes to saying anything of any actual value or substance. He has made a couple of remarks. So, for instance, when the protests against India's Citizenship Amendment Act were going on and really gaining strength in December of 2019, which is the exact time when Bera got this appointment to chair this subcommittee on Asia.
Mm-hmm.
He did make a couple of remarks, and I'll quote, for instance. He said that India's strength is as a secular democracy, which was particularly relevant in context of the anti-CAA protests, considering that, for those who don't know, the CAA is a extremely controversial piece of legislation, which basically sets religion as the criteria for obtaining Indian citizenship. So he said India's strength is as a secular democracy, and the strength of any democracy is protecting the rights of minority groups. But, and he complained, after having said that, which was the strongest statement he ever made about that, he complained that most of his conversations with colleagues were about Kashmir, which
Mm-hmm.
that was in December 2019, just a few months earlier.
Mm-hmm.
This Article 370 had been abrogated, had been revoked by Modi's regime, and the semi-autonomy of Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, was stripped away, and the region was essentially annexed.
Mm-hmm.
So, in context of that having happened a few months previously, in context of the CAA protests, anti-CAA protests ongoing at that very time, Bera complained that most of his conversations with colleagues are about Kashmir. He complained that, quote, that becomes a barrier to all the other things that we truly could accomplish in a partnership. And he said that his desire was for us to, quote, move past a conversation on Kashmir to a conversation on trade, a conversation on defense. So then
Essen-
that was December of 2019. Now, if you fast forward a few months and you go on to March of 2020, just 4 months later, the CAA protests were the anti-CAA protests had grown massive across India. They were becoming very diverse. They were basically spearheaded by Indian Muslims, but people from all communities, including the Sikh community, were joining them. They were millions strong. They could not be stopped, and they seemed unstoppable at the time. Well, they were finally stopped. They were stopped in February of 2020 when the Modi regime responded with an anti-Muslim pogrom in Delhi, in the streets of Delhi, with the worst anti-minority violence in the streets of Delhi since the 1984 Sikh genocide. And that basically put a complete halt to the anti-CAA protests, which was ultimately fully stopped in, I believe, March of 2020 when the Modi regime put India under lockdown because of the pandemic. Well, Bera did comment about the February 2020 Delhi pogrom. And his comment was, we are all watching the riots, I quote, in Delhi, and worry they are going down a dangerous road that makes it harder for us to be a strong advocate for India. Again, his strongest statement. And what really popped out to me about his statement was not only his use of the word riots for what was actually, according to a wide variety of Indians themselves, pogrom, and pogrom state that was a state-sponsored pogrom, but also the fact that his comments about it were wrapped in with a complaint. And once again, a complaint about how the issue is not that this atrocity is occurring, but his concern is that the occurrence of the atrocity makes it difficult for him to be a strong advocate for India.